evidence. I'm the world's leading expert in the Mac, John. What's your resume?
You're issuing contradictory instructions. You're insubordinate. You make people miserable.
Most people only know the myth of Steve Jobs.
Everybody, someone clear the auditorium.
But I've uncovered 3 life-changing lessons that you can steal from him.
The camera's not turning on. Not turning on.
And 2 warnings you cannot afford to ignore.
Here. We'll let an expert see if he can turn it on.
If you want to be like Steve Jobs, if you want to make your dent in the universe, here is all you need to do. Be unwanted by your birth parents, get adopted, then rejected by your first adoptive family, raised by blue-collar parents in a sleepy California town that just so happens to become the global capital of all tech, get bullied, drop out of college after 6 months, stumble into a revolutionary technology that no one else recognizes, team up with a kid in a garage and build the future of personal computing, and then get fired from your own company by the CEO and the board that you hired, start something new, almost go bankrupt, buy a failing animation company, bet everything, get invited back to the company that exiled you, invent the iMac, invent the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, redefine 5 industries, quietly battle cancer while launching world-changing products, refuse surgery, try to cure yourself with fruit, die at 56. That's it. That's the playbook. That's all it takes to be Steve Jobs. Hey, if you don't know me, why would you? I'm Judson Morgan. I'm a son of an economist and a grandson of a preacher, and I've started 13 companies and made $100 million in revenue. This is a show about living abundantly as we align with God and his purposes. I'm here to reframe the abundant life because most of us are stuck in scarcity. Today, I thought it'd be super interesting to take a look at Steve Jobs from the perspective of a Christian entrepreneur. What lessons can we gather from a guy like Steve? He's a controversial dude, insanely successful, world-changing. He's shaped so much of our digital life, and I've uncovered 3 lessons that I think you can implement into your life and work, as well as a couple warnings about identity and how it shapes your life and death. So Jobs invented the personal computer, the graphic interface, the mouse, the MP3 player, the smartphone, and the tablet. Or did he? Let's start with lesson number 1 that we can take from the life of Steve Jobs. I call this the remix. It was Picasso who said, good artists copy, great artists steal. Steve was a great artist. In 1979, Xerox was a corporate giant, one of the most powerful and profitable tech companies in the world. People called it the Google of its time. When Jobs visited this top secret project they were working on, he was blown away. Later, he said, they just had no clue about what they had. It was the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. So what did he see? The personal computer graphical interface, the mouse, and bitmapped displays. So what did he do? He stole their ideas. Steve Jobs didn't invent the personal computer, the mouse, the GUI, but he saw before anyone how transformational they were. And he took action and he turned those ideas into actual usable products. Xerox had the technical skill, but not the vision. Without vision, the people perish. And where is Xerox today? He did the same thing with a mobile phone, remember? Apple was a computer company, not a phone company. The mobile phone had already been invented decades earlier by Martin Cooper at Motorola in 1973. By the early 2000s, smartphones existed too. Palm and BlackBerry were dominating the space. Remember the Crackberry? Typing away on that little keyboard? But Jobs saw something that they didn't. The future wasn't just a smartphone with more features. It was a completely new interface. So he stole the category, reimagined it, and designed something so elegant and intuitive that it didn't just compete, it bankrupted Palm and killed BlackBerry and turned Apple into the most valuable company on earth. He didn't invent the smartphone. He turned it into a lifestyle, a status symbol, and a supercomputer in your pocket. So what's the takeaway for us? If Steve was actually just a remixer, the guy we thought was inventing modern personal computing, it's actually really freeing. Most of wealth building and abundance just comes from mashing up what has already come before. The Bible says it this way, there's nothing new under the sun. Or later in Ecclesiastes, what is happening now has happened before. And what will happen in the future has happened before because God makes the same things happen over and over again. I don't know about you, but to me that feels freeing. We can embrace who we are, where we came from, our ideas and passions, and find our unique mashup that is our gift to the world. The special mix of your gifting and your experience is just what God has prepared to use for the calling he has on your life. This podcast is a good example. I'm taking the life of Steve Jobs, everything I've read about him and heard about him over many years, and giving you my take on it. No one has my take. So So when I feel ill-equipped to deliver the message that God has given me, I remember that it's just a remix through the filter of my faith, my walk with God, my pains, joys, failures, and successes. And I don't have to feel the pressure of creating something new because there isn't anything new. I can relax and remix. But Steve, as the ultimate remixer, isn't where he had his biggest breakthrough. Lesson number 2 is called The Wilderness is the Gateway. I can only imagine how brutal it must have been for him to be fired from the very company that he founded and led to massive success. The CEO and board he brought in to help him run his company fired him. Talk about betrayal, man. His whole life had been built to this point. He had put everything into the company and it was his creation in so many ways, and it was just ripped out from under him. He was quoted as saying that after that happened, he considered giving up. If you want to go deep into suffering and how the challenges of life are the path of the hero, check out this episode on the purpose and path of pain here. But although Steve's life was torn in two, he didn't give up. He didn't know what to do or where to go, but he started taking steps forward. He found out that George Lucas, the Star Wars guy, needed to sell some assets due to an expensive divorce. And there was a small group of animators building a computer for the specific use of movie animation. Steve was interested in the computers, not the movies. And he got this small company at a bargain. He named it Pixar. And you know what Pixar became? The most successful animated movie company in the world. But when Steve bought it, it wasn't even making movies. It was literally just making a computer to help make a few VFX shots for the Star Wars movies. Those movies were done. So it was basically an empty shell. And Steve said later that if he had known how much it would have cost to keep it running, he never would have bought it. But again, he faced the wilderness. He must have been incredibly discouraged. You can just imagine. But he walked through it until he found a pathway out. He took the next step forward. The Pixar team made an animated short and it won an Oscar, and then he made a deal with Disney to make Toy Story, and the rest is history. We tend to look at these larger-than-life world figures like Steve Jobs, and we forget the uncertainty that they faced and the courage that they had to push through. We tend to magnify our own struggles using them as an excuse rather than a pathway. When we actually look closely and consider what Steve must have felt during that time, it can give us courage to face our suffering and struggle. The rug will be pulled out from under you if it hasn't already. And what matters is what you do when that happens. As Steve said when he gave a commencement address at Stanford in 1998, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. When we look back at our lives, we see that trials were the path into endurance, and endurance is what produces character. His trials were the gateway to Jobs 2.0. When you look at his leadership, his insights, his products, his way of living, it all changed after the wilderness. It was the season of his life that birthed the iPhone, which changed everything. It's not easy to accept the wilderness like Steve did, and I'm sure it wasn't easy for him, because in so many ways the path is dark and unknown, and if you don't give up, we will get through it, and we will discover the promised land is just on the other side. There are many other lessons we could learn from Steve: his ability to listen to his intuition in the face of massive resistance, his maniacal focus, his detachment from the pursuit of wealth, and freedom from the trappings of riches. But I wanted to highlight something different. The last lesson I wanted to talk about today is Jobs' focus on simplicity. I call it the superpower of simplicity, otherwise known as keep it simple, stupid. When I was in college, my mentor gave me this book called The Celebration of Discipline. It covers a bunch of spiritual disciplines, fasting, prayer, solitude, but one surprised me: simplicity. I read it at my mentor's lake house in rural New Hampshire. I remember walking the dirt paths, sitting on the dock, watching the still water, and just realizing how different life felt when it was quiet. I grew up in California, went to college in Chicago, then moved to New York City. Simplicity wasn't on the menu. I wonder if that idea is new for you too. Do you feel like there's just too much going on externally and internally? These days, it's cliche to say that we're overstimulated, but it's also hard to overstate it. Just look at YouTube. This podcast was uploaded to a platform where 720,000 hours of content go up every day. That's 82 years of video uploaded daily. No wonder why we feel fried. So in my life, when I hit like a problem or an issue, my instinct is usually more effort, more hours, more products, more businesses. But Steve Jobs believed in less. Less is more isn't just a design principle, it's a spiritual discipline. One of the most impactful books I've read is Essentialism. I've mentioned it before on this podcast. Its premise is brutally simple. Almost everything we do doesn't matter. Our joy, success, and peace comes from a handful of things, and the rest is noise. Solomon nailed it 3,000 years ago. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. See, we keep grabbing with both hands, don't we? And we wonder why we're burned out. That's why Steve, for example, wore the same black turtleneck jeans and New Balance sneakers every day. It's why Apple products felt clean, focused, intuitive. He had a gift. He could see through the noise and find the essence. And that obsession with simplicity, it didn't just make the iPhone hit. It bent the world. Let me tell you one last story to drive this home. In 1997, Apple was dying. 12 years after starting the company, Jobs returned to the building he'd been exiled from. Apple had lost $1 billion. They were 90 days from bankruptcy. Nobody even knew what Apple stood for anymore. It was shambles. Jobs sat in on meeting after meeting, long, circular, messy meetings. The execs debated 14 different Mac models, confusing names, overlapping features, chaos dressed as strategy. Then one day, Jobs stood up. He walked to the whiteboard, drew a big box, then split it into 4 quadrants. Top left, consumer desktop. Top right, pro desktop. Consumer laptop, pro laptop. This, he said, is what we're going to make. Everything else, the printers, the weird side projects, all the half-dead Macs, gone. No debate, no research, just cut. Just simplify. People thought he was insane. But that whiteboard moment became the new architecture of Apple. Within a year, the company was profitable. Within a decade, it was the most valuable company on earth. Jobs didn't save Apple by inventing something new. He saved it by simplifying. Sometimes the solution is less. Actually, most of the time. In a team meeting for one of my companies this morning, we did the same thing. We looked at a list of projects and we cut dead weight. Simplicity creates focus. It creates space for what matters. Write this prayer down. Lord, show me where I need to simplify. I want to make more space for you, more space for your calling. Lead me out of my self-made complexity and into your peace. Amen. When I look back at my last company, the biggest wins came from doing less. We had a core strength in the e-commerce space. It would have been easy to chase every new shiny strategy, Facebook ads, influencers, email, funnels. But we paused. We doubled down on what was already working. That was the simplicity. Johnny Ive, Steve Jobs' longtime collaborator, once told this story. Steve would often ask him, "What have you said no to recently?" Johnny gave a decent answer, but Steve pressed, "No, I mean, what do you love? What do you know would work, but you still said no to because we're focusing on this?" That's the kind of simplicity that takes guts. And Jobs didn't just simplify ideas. He simplified by subtraction. He killed the keyboard on the iPhone. He removed the floppy drive, the CD-ROM, all huge risks at the time, all became the new standard. We can't all be Steve Jobs, but we can learn from his commitment to the essential. Design your life and your work like an Apple product. Nothing but what matters, nothing but the essential. Okay, that was 3 lessons we can take from the life of Steve Jobs. Everything is a remix. Wilderness is the gateway, and keep it simple, stupid. But if we only talked about the brilliance and the genius of Steve Jobs, it would be misleading. He was a genius. He built the most valuable company in the world. We all use his products every day. But like so many geniuses and titans of industry, he also lost the plot. 2 quick warnings from the life of Steve Jobs. The first has to do with identity. One core question shapes your life. And that question is, who are you? If your identity is being the creator of perfect computer products, then your work will consume you, right? You'll obsess. You'll sacrifice everything for it. You'll push people to their limits to manifest your vision. You might even deny your daughter, like Steve did, even after a paternity test confirmed that she was his. He famously said, "We're here to put a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why even be here?" It's a compelling idea. And I feel that same calling to make something out of my time on Earth. But when you reverse engineer Steve's life, it's clear his identity wasn't money, it wasn't family, it wasn't eternity, it wasn't God. It was the product. The perfect, beautiful, minimalist device. That was his identity. That was his purpose. But here's the contradiction. He wouldn't let his own kids use these very devices that he built. He knew how addictive they were. No iPads in the house, no endless screen time. He literally gave his life for something he didn't want his kids to use. So it begs the question, where is your identity? If it's in anything other than God, it will eventually fail you, even if you build the most successful company in the world. The second warning is about dying. Jesus said, "Not my will, but yours be done." Steve said, in essence, "I'm going to do it my way." He was diagnosed with a rare but treatable form of pancreatic cancer, and Steve ignored his doctors. He tried to heal himself with a fruit-only diet, and by the time he agreed to surgery, it was too late. Most experts believe that decision basically cost him his life. I mean, it's tragic. When a billionaire dies of curable cancer at 56, something went very wrong. Steve was known for this reality distortion field thing. Have you heard of this? His ability to bend the impossible to his will. The iPhone wasn't supposed to work, but he made it work. Until finally, reality didn't bend. I admire Steve Jobs. I'm inspired by his creativity, his intensity, his relentless pursuit of beauty and function, but I don't want to become him. I want my identity rooted in something deeper, in something eternal. I want to find my joy and peace in purpose, not in what I create, but in the one who created me. When we align and we abide with God, we don't stop building great things, but those things become part of something eternal. See, Steve died at 56. His products may still shape the world for another 10, maybe 20 years, maybe more. But deep down, don't our souls really light up when we pair the work here on earth with the eternal purposes of God? That's the abundant life. 1 John 2:17 says, "And this world is fading away along with everything that people crave. But anyone who does what pleases God will live forever." If you like content like this, I'd be honored if you subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, or if you're watching here on YouTube, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Click below to get a free PDF on 30 wealth basics from a biblical lens and join our newsletter at judsonmorgan.com. That's the pod.